Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of Speaking Legally, where the legal meets the cultural. We're excited to have you join us and be a part of our audience. And thank you for letting us know that this program has been giving you needed information to understand what's happening in real time in the world of news, as well as how that applies to us culturally. And you have two legal experts that are here every single week. My name is Dr. Stacey N.C. Grant, and I'd like to welcome my co-host, Royce Russell Esquire and Edward Pichado Esquire. And hello, Richard. So, Ed, buenas tardes. What time is it?
Yeah, buenas tardes, buenos dias, feliz Navidad, happy holidays, everyone. I hope everyone is enjoying this nice holiday season despite the circumstances. Welcome to the show today, Speaking Legally, where the legal meets the cultural. As usual, I hope you find today's programming educational and uplifting.
Awesome. Thanks, Ed. And over to you, Mr. Russell.
Well, I want to say thank you for attending the show today. And I want to make sure that hopefully everybody's safe, health-wise. And we know that there's supposed to be some weather coming past this way because we do our stuff in real time. So make sure you stack up and stock up. So we'll see you on before the weekend is out, right?
Well,
Yeah,
before the day is out. Yeah.
yeah, it started already. So it's falling in some places. Don't know if it's all sticking, but definitely be safe. And as we are always conscious, our audience is dealing with real life, and real life is this pandemic is not over. So there's a whole lot going on that we need to manage. So make smart choices when it comes to your holiday plans. You know, I've seen a lot of memes and tweets and things out there that say, you know, sacrifice getting together this year so you can be together and be alive next year. So, you know, just use wisdom in what you're doing. People are spreading this disease asymptomatic. They don't know. So be careful out there. But in addition to all of that, as if 2020 did not have more than its share of trauma, of stories, of situations that we've discussed even before it became news stories, just in helping you to be equipped with the knowledge, things like when we talked about DACA and how we talked about what might happen with the challenges to the election. But here we go with another unfortunate incident. You know, it hurts my heart every time we have to bring these stories up, particularly as a mother of two young Black men. This one is just so disturbing, again, in the news. And he's the same age as my oldest son. I just don't have the words anymore. This has become so much. And Mr. Russell, Mr. Pichado, what say you about Casey Goodson Jr.?
Well, I'll just say give a brief rendition of the facts as I know it. And Ed, you feel free to chime in at any point. For those that are not aware about this case or didn't read or hear about this case, it is my understanding that the Department of Justice and marshals were targeting someone else, and they were on their covert mission. They had deputized a local police officer to join their, I'm going to use the word, task force. And in the midst of that officer joining the task force and them doing the investigation on someone else, regarding someone else, this officer allegedly, and I'll really put quotes around the word allegedly because it is my understanding none of his other fellow colleagues from the Department of Justice have really stepped forward to vouch for what he has said, but he allegedly saw Mr. Goodson waving a gun and then took it upon himself to follow him, and for which he said to Mr. Goodson, either put down the gun or lay down or something of that nature. And there's conflicting reports whether anybody heard that. Obviously, the law enforcement says there's one person that heard that, and plaintiff's attorney, because the Goodson family have retained an attorney, is suing and saying that never happened. But nonetheless, this young man was walking into his home and was killed before his family. His grandmother, I understand, shot in the back. This is a very, very sensitive case and familiar case because it reminds me of the Ramarley Graham matter, for which he was in his home and he was shot in front of his grandmother and 6-year-old brother, where the police alleged that he possessed the gun and that they followed him all the way home, and they really lied and fabricated saying that he ran, but videotape from his residence showed that he walked home nonchalantly and was unaware that anyone was even following him and acted as such. And he was killed in front of his family. So these facts, loose facts as we know them, is similarly eerie and the same. And, we bring it to you because we have to bring it to you. We bring it to you because we don't want anybody to lay dormant and think that, the day is done and the day is over, unlike, like we have done before in the past. Ed?
Yeah, I mean, listen, it's amazing that, last week we were talking about home, right? When it came to your other client, Trey
Kowalski, yes.
Yeah, Kowalski Treywick, he's in his home. You got Ramarley Graham entering his home. You got this young man shot at the front door of his home. The family is actually saying he was shot in the back. The latest news story that I recall reading is saying that the coroner's office or whatever body is performing the autopsy has not come out with a report exactly stating where he was shot for some reason. I would imagine that if they go ahead and reveal that he was shot in the back, that, it's going to have, an effect on this investigation in terms of, what really happened and whether this law enforcement officer, who I believe was a sheriff's deputy, his version of the events in terms of, did he shoot this young man in the back versus, him facing him, and did he even know that this officer was approaching him? All those issues are of interest here. And as the article, the headline of the article here on the screen mentions, apparently the U.S. Marshal at first stated that this incident appeared to be justified and had to basically take that back when the mayor of the city, I believe, of Columbus, where this occurred, disagreed and said that the shooting was still under investigation. I hope that that when President-elect Biden takes office, that whoever he assigns or appoints as the Attorney General will pay close attention to the investigation that has been commenced by the Department of Justice in this matter. You can
understand that the Department of Justice, we may not appreciate it, but we can understand that the Department of Justice wants to make sure that their agency is cleared of any wrongdoing. And they're probably kicking themselves in their head saying, why did we deputize this guy to join our task force when we know, take it for one, I do defense work on a federal level, and you do too, that when the feds are targeting someone, FBI, Department of Justice, they're not looking at anyone else. They don't have time to be distracted. They're not trying to have their investigation blown. And believe me, the investigation is now blown because they didn't capture the target. You know what I mean? This has created a bombshell as far as their investigation is concerned. It's my understanding that, whoever they were targeting or whatever they were doing is unresolved and still at large. And so, we see once again, the premature, calling of the media and trying to quail. It reminds me almost of Patrick Lynch from the New York City Police Department.
Well, the Police Benevolent Association.
Yeah, Police Benevolent Association. Always got to strike out first. Always got to put a statement out there. Doesn't have the wherewithal to wait, to see, to really let the wheels of justice move slowly as they. That doesn't mean that you don't protect your employee. There's certain civil servant rights that person has. But to make a statement days, right? What's the sense of having an investigation if it's justified? We should just fold up and pack up everything, right, and just go home.
Well, let's play what the media has to say. You all have framed it. I'm curious for us to hear what CNN has put out, because there's been a couple of stories, of course, after the commercial, but there's been a couple of conflicting stories, even about this case and what's going on and how the investigation is being handled. So I'm just curious for us to hear this take and look at where you're getting the media from, because CNN has one version, NBC has another version, and there's a listing, if you just put his name in, on how many different versions to this one story. So we pray the truth comes
Goodson's,
out.
Mother, Tala Payne, and the Goodson family attorney, Sean Walton. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Don.
I am so sorry for your loss, Tamara. Casey was shot and killed as he was walking into his own home. Tell me what you know about what happened to your son that day, please.
All I know is that my son left home that morning, as he would do as a normal person, to go to a dental appointment. After returning home from his dental appointment, well, before returning home, he stopped to get Subway for him, my mother, and my 5-year-old son. Upon returning home, Casey was entering the house. Casey was executed, went into the home. His body fell into the house with the sandwiches, with the bullet holes.
And so, Don, I think it's important to note that.
Hang on a second, Sean. Because I think it's important for people to hear, Talent, and it's important to hear you. But I just want to know, unfortunately, Talent, there are so many mothers that have to go through this, and we don't know, what this investigation is going to cover. But there's so many mothers who have to go through this, and that particular pain that you're feeling right now shouldn't be felt by any mother, regardless of the circumstances.
No, sir, it should not. This was senseless. My son would not have harmed a fly. If my son was given a command, he would have listened. He was a law-abiding citizen. Everything he did was legal. My son was murdered. And there's just no ways around it. And he deserves justice. I mean, the kid had a whole life in front of him. He had plans, he had dreams. He wanted to be a CCW instructor. He wanted to own, he had a CDL license. He was working, saving, trying to save enough money to purchase his own truck. He wanted to drive his own trucks. He didn't want to drive for nobody no more. He wanted to do his own thing. He had plans, he had dreams, he had goals, and they were ripped from him for nothing.
Sean, thank you for being patient. I've got to ask you because, he was armed. He had, Ohio has a concealed carry law. He was a carry permit holder. He was legally armed. He has no criminal background. He was not the target of any investigation. Do you know why he was even confronted by the deputy?
Don, I think that is a major question because, in 2020 in America, a Black man should be able to legally possess a firearm in a state that allows you to openly carry a weapon. And so, with that being the case, with Casey being someone who was a law-abiding citizen, he was peaceful. He always preached to his family the need to safely follow gun laws. And so Casey was a person who did everything right. And so what happened that day that caused this deputy to take the life of this Black man as he walked into his own home? He left the dentist that day. He was carrying a face mask and Subway sandwiches, got his keys in the door, and was executed. So we have no idea why he was confronted, but it's on Jason Meade to tell the family what happened that day.
There are rallies, Tamara, calling for the schedule all week, right? Calling for justice. All summer, people all over this nation protested police brutality and racism. Do you feel that this is a systemic problem in Columbus as well as this country?
Absolutely, absolutely. I believe it's a problem all around, but it's swept under the rug because these are their officers and they protect them. We're not protected, but they are. They're given a badge to serve and to protect us. But because of the color of our black man's skin, they're not protected. They become targets instead of somebody that they have to protect. I believe that I refuse to call him officer. I believe that this inhumane man that murdered my son was just looking for trouble. He didn't get his target. He didn't get what he was there for. He didn't find who he was looking for. Whatever his mission was, whatever he was there for, whatever brought him around those parts, it didn't complete his mission. He has a history of being a violent man, and I just feel like he was fired up. He was ready, and when whatever he was doing fell through, my son just happened to pull up and be in the wrong place at the wrong time, and became his target because he was a black man.
Ms. Payne, I'm so sorry for what you're having to deal with. We're so sorry about what happened. We're going to continue to follow. Sean, thank you for joining.
Oh, that's hard to watch.
One of the things that I pick up on this is one, she's definitely a truth teller. If he had a carry permit, the gun on him was legal. If he's not committing a crime, there's no reasonable suspicion or probable cause to even approach him, to even have a conversation with him on a level where law enforcement, outside of, hey, how you doing? There was no reason whatsoever. And this is where the classism and the racism all jumps up in one. If you believe that Black folks are bad, Black folks are violent, Black folks have no rights, and if you believe that this person lived in an area where, what? You got a permit? What? To carry a gun legally? Nah, that could not happen. If your assumption is that person could not have been following the law to the T, and therefore they must have this gun illegally, then that is the narrative that makes for the confrontation. It fits like a puzzle. Because if that officer thought that, oh, this young man who has this gun has it legally, there's no need for me to confront him. There's no need for me to have a conversation. So it's the presumption that he possessed it illegally, which led to the confrontation, mental confrontation, not even physical confrontation, mentally within the officer's own mind. I'm gonna stop this guy. That gun must be illegal. I'm gonna do this thing, which led to his death. No priors, not that you have to walk around with a shirt or a sweatshirt that says I have a prior record. Follow the law to a T. Therefore, when you talk about cardiac arrest, a tactical guide on how to handle unlawful police stops, this is one of those scenarios where you can follow all the A, B's, and C's and all the rules of thumbs and have the conversation, and somebody decides that they're going to do what they're going to do. And we're left holding the remaining chips.
I mean, once again, we're discussing when stereotypes meet the law, right? Where the cultural meets the legal, all right? Because, you have legal gun ownership here, the legal ability to carry open, but it clashes with the reality that you're a Black man. And this was mentioned just now. I believe the mother mentioned him wearing a mask, right? And ever since this pandemic came down, I've always wondered what is going on in the white law enforcement officers' minds when they see all of these black men running around with their faces covered. It kind of adds to that already environment of fear. And I'm not saying that fear is at all justified, because it's unjustified. It often results in the death scenario that you see here. But, once again, until we get to this point where we deal with this issue of black men being demonized, being stereotyped, you're gonna, have these incidents, and you're gonna have black men risking their lives, exercising their rights under the law, because this is an exercise of right? You go and you get your license to carry. You carry. I mean, there have been incidents in the past, even here in New York City, where you will have an undercover African American law enforcement officer get shot by white officers because they're like, what the hell is that black man doing running around with a gun? There is an expectation that if you're black and you're male, you're not supposed to be carrying a gun at all. The only reason you are carrying a gun is because you are about to commit a crime, you robbing a bank, you're about to murder somebody.
And I guess this goes to the point that I said this before, and I'll say it again. When you talk about gun laws in America, and you want to talk about affecting gun laws, have a majority of folks of the African diaspora, Latino diaspora, apply for a gun license, and see how the law will change to the disadvantage to ensure that you cannot get it. And as you said, Ed, he dotted his I's, he crossed the T's, he had his permit, he had everything in order. Everything in order. But this also goes to another point that, and this is separate from him. I'll say it again. This is separate from him. This is separate from him. This is separate from him. But we can't ignore what I'm about to say. When you leave your house as a person of color, you need to have a mental note and a mental plan. The mental note is, who am I in America and how America sees me? I'm not saying that you have to accept it, but you have to recognize it, because you might make a move playing chess. You might make a move that a king can't make. Only a pawn can make it. And that can end up with a tragic result. So when you talk about wearing a mask, yeah, we need to be conscious of the type of mask we wear. You know what I mean? All black and black mask. Look, I'm all for exercising whatever you want to exercise. Just understand, for every action there's a reaction. And that is ultimately the fight that we have here in America. And so, I'm sure when he woke up in the morning, he wasn't thinking about having a plan. He wasn't thinking about anything but, I'm going to get these sandwiches and I'm going to come back.
No, he went to the dentist.
Oh, excuse me. Went to the dentist, then stopped to get sandwiches and then come back
home.
Right? I mean, that's all he was thinking about. And that's all he should think about.
Now, one of the things that surprised me a little bit, though, is that Don Lemon said, we agree that he was armed. I'm not completely sure about that. I thought that there was a debate as to whether he was actually armed or not. The question, I would love to hear about some drilling down on that, because that's also big, despite the issue of whether it was legal or not. Because I thought when I first read about this incident, there was somehow an indication, an insinuation that the officer might have thought that the sandwich in of itself is a weapon, which is a common theme throughout these incidents, you'll have somebody carrying something that some law enforcement officer thinks is a weapon, and later on come to find out it's just an object that appears to resemble one.
And or in Ramali Graham's case, it was nothing. Like, I thought he had a gun. Well, what do you think? What is driving the thought process? And that's what we're really talking about here. What is driving the thought process, right? I mean, the facts of the case will shake itself out. Mm-hmm. But what's going to live forever is what is guiding the thought process here. What is guiding the thought process that, no, he can't be, cum laude from law school. You know what I mean? He can't be that smart. She can't be that great. She must be taking steroids because she's won every Wimbledon in the world and you just can't beat her. Something must be wrong with the makeup of our body structures, because we excel in certain areas and will excel in all areas if exposure and opportunity, time and opportunity meets itself, right? So, what is it? What is the thought process that leads anyone to say, you know what, we was going after A. A is not here today, so let me turn my focus to B. And then when I turn my focus to B, I'm going to turn all my prejudices and all my stereotypes with it to B, because no one has given any reason why he needed to talk to that young man at all.
And there's another issue here also that I read about, where they were supposed to immediately send this case over to, I believe, the entity called the BCI, the Bureau of Criminal Investigation, which is a state of Ohio entity for investigation, and they did not. And they tried to do it, I think, 3 days after the incident, and BCI said, after you done tainted the scene and messed things up, now you want us to take a look at this case? Oh, no, you're going to have to own that investigation locally. And I believe also the officer hasn't submitted to an interview yet either. So I think this case right here is interesting. And let's talk about the interesting part of this case, right? Because it's amazing how some cases attract attention.
Well, that's my next point.
And the reason why I mention this is because anybody who says that they're in this movement to end this is going to have to exercise patience, is going to have to exercise grit, is going to have to exercise some stamina, because no change is going to occur without a sustained, consistent movement that continues to pursue with the same vigor every one of these incidents in the same way with the same energy. That is what brought about what's called the civil rights movement. After those 3 girls died of that bombing in Atlanta in that church, the folks at that time who were fighting the forces that be made a decision, and it took the form of different organizations, different people from different backgrounds, different races, different religions got together and said, this must stop. And they sustained, and they were at it, and they were at it for years, and they didn't get tired. They just continued. Some got tired and fell off, but that main core continued to go on, and that's what it's going to take. We can't continue to march when it's convenient, or comment when it's convenient, or come out when it's convenient. That's right, Rich. It's going to be a long road.
You can't cherry pick. You can't cherry pick what cases. No. Right? I mean, the value of a Kowalski Trawick, and the value of a Daniel Prude, the value of a Deborah Dana, the value of a Casey Goodson, Breonna Taylor. Like, I often wonder, having been on the tail end of what I'm going to call, for lack of a better term, kind of like major national marching orders, having litigated Ramali Graham, and then 2 months after that, Trayvon Martin happens, and then the focuses shift, and then it goes in another direction as far as exposure, then you have a downturn, which speaks to your stability and consistency, until you have, Eric Gardner, and then many things happen in between. Then you have a downturn until you have a George Floyd or Breonna Taylor that's kind of tied together, but you had Steele, you had other incidents. And look, I think you're right, Ed, and I think that consistency is going to be the way to go. I also think that we have to make sure that we keep alive all the stories as we do here on Speaking Legally, because maybe I have it wrong. The complicated cases, factually, is the one that receives all the airtime. The simplistic cases, this is a simplistic case from a civil rights standpoint, receives no airtime. Now, if we're receiving no airtime because the case is resolved, right? You know what I mean? People are punished, compensation is had, great. And so once again, I think we get right back to the same thing. And Dr. Grant, you talked about this, and Ed, we talked about it a long time ago. We always talk about it. And I'm just going to label it. I'm going to call it the Allen effect. Unless we really get underneath the Allen effect, and what for our viewers, first-time viewers and long-time watchers and listeners, the Allen effect is the Byron Allen. Unless we can get under there and we have somebody that's telling our narrative and really showcasing every case of this nature and showing it at the same level and the same value, you're going to get the cherry picking from the media. We're going to pick this one. We're going to talk about that one. This one we're not going to talk about. Daniel Prue, we ain't going to talk about him. Even more egregious than anything I've seen. We're not going to talk about that. We're going to talk about this other case. Kowalski, we're going to talk about him a little bit. We're going to put that down. We're going to talk about Goodson, maybe not so much. We're going to run with Breonna. It's all important to us. And until we have the Allen effect, you're going to see this cherry picking of what cases get the airtime and what cases don't.
Yeah, it's disturbing. I mean, I remember on this show when we talked about the incident with the sister who got shot by the officer through the window, and she was in the home. That was a case that ended up falling dormant for a period of time, and then resurfaced. That resurfacing, that disappearing, should not be occurring. We have to keep this sustained, and just on a personal level, that's part of the reason why, we continue to talk about these incidents when they appear, and we urge our viewers and our listening audience, our viewing audience, to keep these incidents alive in the minds of the folks that you encounter on an everyday. Let them know. I try to. Anytime that I learn about these incidents, I say to my friends, I say to my neighbors, hey, did you hear about this? And try to engage them on it so that they understand, look, it hasn't stopped. It hasn't stopped. There was a bunch of marching this summer, people, doing this and that, but it's continuing to happen, and it will continue to happen until you have comprehensive change.
Change and reform.
Yeah, the conservative forces in this society bet on fatigue. They bet on inattention. They even bet on the weather.
Oh, they definitely bet on the weather.
They say, hey, listen, once it gets cold, those folks ain't marching nowhere. They're going to stay home. They're going to stay in. Maybe we don't need to be talking about it so much in the media, because that's what's really stirring this up. Maybe we need to, co-opt the leadership or whoever it is that we think are leading them. And as long as we deal with them directly, the rest of them will fall in line. And that has to stop. I say attention and patience, because with a lot of our young people, and some of them that sometimes end up turning to violence, I try to explain that, look, listen, violence is the language of the impatient and those who want immediate answers. Those who are in it for the long run understand that, the time for that is just simply not arrived. It hasn't, you know, until you can say that you've done all that you can do systematically and comprehensively. You can't argue to me that you ready to do that, you know, because it goes beyond the marching. You know, there's so many other things that we need to do to organize our communities that we can't hardly ever argue that it's gotten to that point. You know, you know how hard it is to get people to even come to a meeting sometimes on some of this stuff.
Ed, look, this is part and parcel of why we have Speaking Legally, where the legal meets the cultural. So we can have the hard discussions. We can also give information out to the audience on what's happening. I just want to trickle back because we have some comments from our faithful listeners that I do want to address before we go on to the next thing that we wanted to just highlight before today's show ended. In this particular case, we're talking about whether he had the gun on him or not and speculating. I remember we brought up on this show incidents where people who were of the Caucasian race holding guns on cars, police there, they can carry and openly carry, but no one saw them as a threat. And I think that is part of the problem that we're missing when we raise our voices and we amplify the need for reform and change, is that we're not looking at the disparities, the inequities. Is just inconsistent. So there's so much work to be done, but I really want to get to this comment that Deborah made, because that's interesting, that she was listening at work and a big conflict came up about our discussion with two officers. And in the end, the officer, thinking negative, walked out and said, I never thought of it that way. So it gave someone a different viewpoint, a different context. So Deborah, thank you for saying you love what we're doing and that you're not going to stop watching no matter where you are. And at the end of our police department does need a facelift, right?
Hey,
so
let me just say one thing. And if you know Deborah, you know, lucky my man walked out. You know what I'm saying? Deborah, you know what I'm saying? Like lucky my man was able to walk out, because the Deborah I know, you know, boop bop boop. You lucky he was able to roll out. You know what I'm saying? Because they might have had to wheel my man out. You know, especially if he put his hand in front of the program, that would have definitely caused some knuckles up. But to your point, Jason had mentioned Hodge in our comments. He had said, you know, he mentioned something about heavy rotation, and when we talk about heavy rotation, that's really synonymous with you know, radio stations and playing records, right? Yeah, hashtag heavy rotation, right? And so it gets repeated over and over and over and over. And when he said that, you know, it led me to think about, and you put your critical minds and hats on when it comes down to what I'm saying. In these type of cases, civil rights cases, and put your thinking your hard hat on for this one. It's funny how certain faces can put certain cases in special places. Stay with me. Certain faces can take a case and put it in a special place in heavy rotation, and take that and compare it with how folks look at us as being monolithic. One leader. There's going to be one Michael Jordan. There's going to be one Michael Jackson. There's going to be one, and I'll leave the blank in these type of cases. And if that one ain't on it, then we don't give it no light.
And that's specifically the problem. I mean, we need to stop attaching the incidents to leaders and look at the incidents for themselves. We need to develop an independent mind and an independent thought when it comes to these incidents. You teach your children not to be followers, but to be leaders, right? That's one of the first lessons you give when your kid first shows up that first day at school. You know, be a leader, not a follower. That's what you tell them. But yet we have so many adults that insist on being followers. If they aren't hearing it from a certain person or a certain individual or group of individuals, then it doesn't mean anything. It has no significance. They allow certain people to shape their thoughts as to what to believe and not believe.
And it's not on a certain broadcast, right? Or a certain radio station, right?
Exactly. Like we're not adventurous at all. And I would say in terms of adventurous, it doesn't even have to be the CNN. It doesn't have to be the NBC. It can be the Griot, right? My brother Byron Allen. It can be Roland Martin, who isn't even on TV because, you know, he said something, I guess, that offended certain people. And, you know, they told him, oh, you can't be on TV anymore. So he said, you know what? I'm going to do my show on the internet, and we'll just do it that way. You know, we have to be smarter. We have to be curious. We have to think about, well, okay, let me listen to this certain set of facts. Let me decide for myself whether or not I'm going to think a certain way. And there's nothing wrong with that. You don't have to always say, okay, well, if such and such isn't leading that march or talking about that, then I'm not going to pay attention to it. You know,
you know what, Ed, and I know Dr. Grant, we may want to go to another subject matter, but maybe not at the way we writing and going on this, right? And that's okay. I'm fine with that. I'm fine with that. We move. I mean, the subject matter that we want to talk about will be there next week. And Franklin Davis, affectionately known as Mookie, is watching the show. He knows what the subject matter was going to be for today because he had an issue with that subject matter. We spoke at 6 o'clock this morning, but we may have to put a pin in that for next week because right now, we're doing the cultural part, and you know, we have the legal in the background, and usually it's the vice versa. So we're gonna go back to that cultural part, and that cultural part says that at least for this generation that is coming forward, the concept of being globally intact is met with open arms, hugged, kissed, squeezed, and rubbed down. Really, I mean, like all that. Because when I look at my son, and Ed, you look at your son, and Dr. Grant, you look at your son. I mean, your son is in Germany, Ed. You know what I mean? My son, you know, has visited numerous places. Dr. Grant, your son has visited. The exposure is ridiculous. And in this household here, he walks around with his cell phone, and you always hear something going on. That's of political content. That's of, you know, gender content, cultural content. Yeah, the rap is going on or what have you, but very little. Rap is usually when he jumps in the shower, but outside just walking around, I'm like, I mean, who are you listening to? Oh, yeah, it's this guy. He's talking about boom, boom, boom. Oh, it's this woman. She's talking about that ability to open your arms to other sources of information. Granted, it may not be 100% accurate, or we may have a problem thinking whether it's accurate or not. But what it does, it opens the mind to other means of getting communication and not relying on the three symbols, ABC, NBC, CBS, CNN, and then the four symbols, MSNBC, or however you want to, WPIX, you go on and on. It is this national thought that you see in other countries that we open to hearing everything. And it doesn't have to be stamped with a certain station for it to be true. As a matter of fact, don't stamp it at all. I'll find out what's true. I'll figure it out. I'll listen to everything, and I'll come up with my own thoughts as to what is true. And I think it's very important.
That critical thinking is not being taught, you know, except for those of us who are taking it upon ourselves to do it in our professional arenas, those of us that are within education or training or coaching, that we're telling people and encouraging them to do that critical thinking, or we're raising our children to ask questions, you know, to be able to look and see, well, what's BBC? Well, what is that news station? Some kids don't even know. They don't know what's in the Times. They don't know what other forms of media exist. And that's part and parcel of the problem of how we're educated. You brought it up a couple of shows back that in other countries, they can speak 3-4 languages. Here, what are our kids exposed to? They can barely get to 2. And it's not encouraged to explore learning in other and appreciate the difference in other cultures as much as it is in other areas of the world where they learn English because they want to know what's happening in this Western society, but they also stay true to knowing who they are, where they're growing up, and what they're experiencing and what they're seeing. So the conversation is so broad culturally on what we need to do to equip our young people and to equip us as adults to really have the right facts in order. We don't fact check.
One of the positive things that happened during this 4 years of Trumpism is it forced, or at least it brought to surface, at least in my life, in my household, my son to be able to say, America ain't really got it going on. Look at their government. Look at what we doing. Like, we really, excuse my language, may have it ass backwards. We need to look at some other places. Remember when, the demonization of Cuba was happening rampantly, but meanwhile, things were flourishing. You look at Canada, have a healthcare system where everyone is taken care of, and we're struggling to maintain that or even get that here in the United States. The internal focus that is brought about by environmental and circumstances that has besieged America, as much bad as it is on the surface, it's brought a lot of good to the forefront. We're not the arrogant, king of the hill. Look at us. We're going to correct what your country is doing. When now countries are laughing at us and say, "Yeah, look at your man. Look at your man up top." That's how you're doing it over there, because we do it a lot different over here. Look at what's going on in your society. We don't even use guns.
And one of the things that I'm concerned about is that with this Biden win, that folks are gonna get relaxed and say, "Oh, okay, we got Trump out. It hasn't happened yet, but my concern is Trump gets pushed to the side. How about even if it gets to the point where we get this Democratic majority in the Senate, that is not the time to stop pushing and persisting with our demands. Our demands and our activity has to increase even more. Because like I said earlier, with this particular incident with Brother Casey Goodson, DOJ investigation began. Yes, Royce, I agree. The individuals that are probably heading that and doing the investigation are strictly looking to provide cover for the federal officers that were there on the scene. But how about if that investigation continues past January into February, new AG in, the pressure has to come on now. Like, listen,
right.
President Biden, Vice President Kamala Harris, we want you to take a look at this case. We want you to figure out who's doing the investigation.
And this is a ground ball case too to look at, like if I'm in that position, and this is the first one you give me under a new administration, you say, "Hey, Brother Russell, we tap you as the czar of social justice. Your first case is a young man who's walking into his home and shot in his back, who had a carry permit, no criminal history, no confrontation, never said anything to come on, man. I'm tagging you out before you even swing the bat."
And listen, even if they say they come up with a report that says, "Listen, we looked at everything, the federal officers that were there, let's make sure that even if they didn't do anything possibly that was inappropriate, certainly making sure that they don't perjure themselves, that they give true testimony as to what occurred and what they witnessed. And at the very least, that, if it's done properly, should then give those local authorities and that family the ammunition that they need to go after the individual who committed this heinous act."
And was there opportunities to for our listeners out there, if you ever have a civil rights case and I'm your attorney, you retain me, you will always hear me say the failure to intervene. Were there officers that saw this individual, this office, this deputized sheriff, talking to that young man, and did they say, "Hey man, leave that guy alone.
Stop. What are you doing?
Like what you doing over there?
Get over here."
And he said, "You know what? This is my town. This is my streets. Give that local thing, right? I got this. You stay over there, Mr. Tibbs. I'm gonna take care of it, and we have a problem, right?" So the failure to intervene is a cause of action that needs to be uplifted and used, because although you may not be the person that pulled the trigger, you the person that watched the trigger be pulled. Mm-hmm. So when the officer says in the Kowalski matter, called Kowalski Traywick matter, tells his white counterpart, we're not going to tase. Don't. And you do? What are we talking about?
And we gotta end this blue wall of silence with these officers and individuals on the scene filing, false or misleading reports. And that goes down to the paramedics and the medical personnel who arrive on these scenes.
Yes.
I mean, the other day I was listening to this story about the use of ketamine and the young brother who was shot full of that stuff and died after he was walking home. It did nothing wrong. And the police decide to stop him because they said somebody had reported that he was acting strangely. And that's it. No weapon, that he hadn't done anything to anybody. He's walking home. They stop him. And then the medical personnel, under pressure from the so-called pressure from the police, decide to, per protocol, inject them with ketamine. This, it's like in the in the Eric Garner case out there in Staten Island, on down to a number of these incidents where these medical personnel start acting in league with the law enforcement and not, either taking every step to make sure that they save these individuals or start, writing funny reports to be able to provide cover for these officers. And
to that point, one time I was speaking at the National Black Lawyers Association. They had their convention, and someone from the medical field raised their hand. They said, "What can we do? What can we do to help?" And I said, "Write the truth, man. Be transparent. Don't say, a patient was in confrontation with police. Where are you getting that from?
You wasn't there.
The kid came in unconscious, right? You know what I'm saying? Well, don't adopt. Medical records only speak to where you're having the pain. My back hurt. Why I was hit there. There's no narrative and no place for you to put plaintiff assaulted police or resisted arrest and suffered. What are you doing? What are you doing? So to a certain degree, the environmental issues in reference to what has been going on in our environment from a civil rights perspective has probably galvanized and has shaken, and even the protests, right? So for those that thought that this is just a black thing, excessive force, George Floyd, and didn't really step over the line, they stepped over the line when it came to politics and it came to Trump over Biden. And when they stepped over the line, they got treated as if they were at a rally for George Floyd. And so now they kind of shook, right? They kind of shook a little bit, right? They kind of like gentrification, right? You move into a certain neighborhood, you get shook, right? You kind of say, oh, this is what goes on in this neighborhood. To me, that makes you a better juror, because now when you become a juror, and I'm giving you an example of what took place, or I'm telling you this could not be true, you could say, you know what? I live on 112th Street. You know what? That is BS. Or they do bother the kids in front of the building. I mean, look, that's a small upside, but it is an upside. And so when you're out there and you're protesting for Biden or Trump and you get slammed your head through the car window, or you get kicked, or you get pushed off your bike, now you know. And so that may make you a little bit more knowledgeable, and you have a little bit of your senses, more of your senses, and the wherewithal that every story that I hear, I thought he had a gun, might make you reflect when you was walking on the sidewalk and the bikes were right there and you got a little close to the bike, the police bike, and next thing you know, you got hit across your head.
These are the sad realities that we're dealing with, and why it's important for us, to your point earlier, own our own narrative. The Griot TV that's launching, what Byron Allen is doing, it's already in the history books. He's already broken and set trends, right? We have multiple people within our community that have gotten to the point where they can own a TV network, and they're choosing to put whatever programming they have on. When it comes to the legal, when it comes to the cultural, here is a space where we can talk about it with two people who are not just pontificating on the facts. They're litigating every day for their clients, for justice, knowing that when someone walks into their office, they're able to relate to them because they understand exactly what we're dealing with in our community. And because they have done the extra of going to become the attorneys and to choose this as their way of giving back, they can advocate for justice on your behalf. So we don't have to think that there are only certain people in certain communities that can advocate for us. People who look like us do this work. People who look like us day in and day out are fighting for the rights of those of us in our community. So we really hope that we open up dialogue. I'm happy to hear that, Deborah, you're listening to this at work and other people might have it going and they might have their commentary on what we're sharing, but we're staying true to the game. We're showing what we see, but we're also getting the legal counsel from two people who practice this law daily. So it's not conjecture. It's not let's pretend. No, this is how they look at what we're seeing and what this applies to us, what we need to be aware of, how we can combat some of the things and be proactive in how we're dealing with pushing for reform and change. So I'm going to let both of you just give your final thoughts as we are winding down this. We have more to talk about, but like Mr. Russell said, it'll be here next week. The drug is used to calm Black men during, because we're too strong. They're intimidated by us. And when we talk about these things, people look like, oh no, not in America. We want everybody to be treated the same way. Well, those who've been living somewhere under a shell or a rock, this is not the reality. And it's years and years. And here's the real sad truth. All these names that we said in 2020 don't amount to how many names never make it to any news outlet. How many stories never get past what happens in the back of the police station, in the police cars, in our community. Families whose stories are never told because of the years in which we have suffered underneath this kind of oppression and the blue wall. That's a whole nother show. And
that's an excellent point, because what I tell folks quite often is who say, man, this seems like to be happening every day. No, it has been happening. What it is that it's starting to come to light more often. You got the cameras on the cell phones. You got people now bringing this to the light, and because of the expanded communication abilities, these incidents are now coming to our view quite more often because of that, not because it wasn't happening before. Of course that was happening before. For those of us who live in the community, them old folks will tell you so many stories about how this was happening regularly, and finally it's coming to light. I also heard a interesting story the other day about a term called excited delirium, which scientifically seems to mean nothing except that it justifies this sort of conduct by these officers in terms of, how they, treat the folks who come into their hands in custody, and used to justify this use of these, particular drug to somehow pacify folks. And a lot of this has racist implications as to who seems to be agitated and who doesn't. And the whole idea of, well, like you said, Royce, me asking you a question isn't looked at as simply asking a question, but as some sort of attack against you.
Mm-hmm.
And I would tell you this, and this will be my parting words for today, is, when we say the light is being highlighted, it's being shown, it's coming to light. Let me tell you, this is a little flashlight. It ain't even a big light, because when you look at the numbers of deaths in relations to Black folks by the hands of police, the light is not even that bright. It's very, very small compared to the discourteous, the unprofessionalism, which leads you to the wrongful death that is suffered by people of color every day. So as we take our video camera to see, oh wow, look, he's slapping that guy across the head. Oh wow, take out the camera when the officer is speaking, what I'm going to say, out of his mind to someone that could be your mother, your sister, your brother, your father, your husband, your wife, that we kind of redefine where the line is going to be. You're not going to speak to me that way. And because you're not going to speak to me that way, I've now set this line that you're never going to touch me. And we're never going to get to the part of death before you. And that's the everyday grind. The everyday grind. And you're not talking to me like that. As a matter of fact, pen to paper, come again. So when people know, when they go to my apartment, they come to see me, all right, guys, we can't act this way. That's where we need to be.
Absolutely. Our hearts go out again to this family, this mother. I mean, my heart was in my chest just hearing her just talk through that loss. I mean, I have 2 boys and he's the same age as my oldest son. So, it's hard. And what I will say to all of us that know law-abiding law enforcement who really got into the job and the profession because they wanted to serve and protect, that part of that responsibility is not letting the blue wall of silence continue, because it not only makes the profession look bad, but you want, I would hope, to really be a part of real reform and change. So to all of the outstanding officers that all of us know, those in law enforcement who are doing the right thing, let's really celebrate you by taking a stand against what's not right. You know what's not right. You know what's happening behind the scenes. I'm not going to share one of my family members that's involved in an elite unit in New York City. And when his uniform is off, he gets treated just like anybody else. And he speaks up and he stands for it. And there's some backlash, but it can be done. Somebody has to start breaking down this wall. I think Jason said it in the feed. We have to chip away at it, because that's what's causing the covering and the blanket for not addressing what needs to be addressed. And you don't know the pain until you experience some sort of injustice. And we're experiencing way too much in our communities over and over again. This is not just 2020, 2019. This is years. So at some point, something has to happen. And when the history books are written, where do we stand? What will our kids say about our stand in advocating for justice? So I want to thank Mr. Russell and Mr. Pichardo for their daily work, what you do every day to advocate for justice, for being on top of the cases, that we can bring it to our community and that we can use our outlet. It's a powerful outlet. We have it. We're going to use Speaking Legally to share what needs to be shared so that we can advocate and push for change. So final words before we close out our show.
Well, I say to everyone, be safe during the season, enjoy it, and, farewell. Take care.
Well, I can't wait to see everybody next week. For those who celebrate Christmas, I'm here. You can send me the package. For those who celebrate Kwanzaa, I'm here. You can send me the package the week after next week. So feel free to send what you must.
Look, you didn't ask for Hanukkah gifts. That's still going on now. You want those too?
Yeah, for those that want to send me a little Hanukkah, they can do that as well.
Oh my goodness. We're going to pray for you, Mr. Russell. But everyone, thanks for tuning in, and we appreciate all of our faithful listeners. And Mr. Pichardo, any hablamos español words as we close out?
Feliz Navidad.
Feliz Navidad. I knew you was going to say Feliz Navidad.
Prospero año y felicidad.
Oh, if I didn't love these two. All right, everyone. Have a good rest of your day.
Dolly.